Hello there and welcome to Sharing Wisdom. I am your host, Angie Wisdom, and today I'm excited that we have Adam Contos joining us. He is the former CEO of RE/MAX, smashed all sorts of records. But before that, he was actually in the Marine Corps SWAT team and worked in negotiations and narcotics, so many exciting things that he used to do, which bridged the gap to where he went to RE/MAX, and now as a leadership coach and really working with the people, actually known as the CEO of the people, which I can't wait to get into and learn more about that. So welcome, Adam. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Angie. I'm looking forward to talking to you today and sharing some wisdom with your listeners.
Love it. Love it. I was mentioning earlier, I'm excited because a lot of my following is from the real estate industry. So I think it's fascinating that, you're the retired CEO of RE/MAX and you really blew a lot of the records out of the water, and especially through kind of an interesting time through the pandemic as well. So we will talk about that, but let's kind of back up a little first, because your career in the Marine Corps, then going into, SWAT team and law enforcement is fascinating to me in itself, but then transitioning into leadership. So take me back to kind of where that started and your time in the Marine Corps and SWAT.
Well, the day after I graduated high school, I joined the Marines and did some active duty time, and then went in the Marine Reserves after that. And being a third generation police officer, was the blood was in my family, if you will. My brother's actually still a cop. He started in 92 working where he's at right now. So he's been there quite a while. He's their senior patrolman or detective or whatever he's doing now. But I got into law enforcement young. And while I was in the Marine Reserves, I got my police commission and started working the streets pretty young, and fell right into the special teams space because of my time in the military. They really appreciated understanding tactics and the implementation of the different tools around a tactical situation. So I got into that, and I fell in love with special teams and the high standards and systems that you implement in special teams. So special teams like SWAT, K9, motors, all of the narcotics, things like that, is simply being the very best you can at very specific things. So when you unpack that, really that's what business is we find a niche in business and we become the very best we can in very specific things, because focus is where you find the freedom in business and where you find your customer base. I became an entrepreneur. I started a couple of different businesses. I actually started an online business in the late 1990s when the internet was brand new and nobody trusted doing transactions on the internet. So that was a little challenging. And then I built a consulting company also. I was a counterterrorism instructor and a homeland security instructor. So I built a personal safety and security consulting business for the corporate world out there. And it kind of launched me into real estate, where I met my mentor, the founder of RE/MAX, Dave Liniger. And one day he said, "Hey, why don't you shut all that down?" I was a SWAT commander. I had the best job in law enforcement, where all I did was go to fun calls and I worked hours that I wanted to work. And I said, "Well, I have to leave these great jobs and shut down my business." He goes, "That's fine. You have a great opportunity here." So I thought, okay, I'm one to take risk. So I jumped into RE/MAX and started as a business consultant with RE/MAX, working with franchisees, and worked my way up to be CEO.
Wow. Impressive. I mean, the variety of the things that you did and where you landed, it kind of blows my mind a little bit. And so I'm curious, as you were going through, the Marine Corps and SWAT and special teams, and you were offered that position and, persuaded to come over to RE/MAX full-time and leave everything, did you know that you had the gifts that you had that were going to lead to such greatness for you?
I knew I had the opportunity, but I would have to mine the gift. And Dave had mentioned that to me before. He says, all you can give people is opportunity. They have to do the work. So I knew I had to do the work, and I put my systems and processes in place. Obviously, Marine Corps is a system and process. Law enforcement is a system and process. Being an entrepreneur is a system and process. Franchising, which is really what RE/MAX is, it's a franchise company that franchises in the real estate space. And then where I'm at now in franchising, we own 2 franchise companies here at the investment group that I'm at now. it's all systems and processes. So I knew if I followed a system and process, one, I could, any part of my life, I could stay in great shape. I could, manifest great relationships. I could manifest happiness by following my systems and processes. And I could be very successful in whatever I want to do, because ultimately, and Angie, this as a business coach, you put them on the system and process. And if they follow it, they're going to get results.
So true. And you keep mentioning, I love that, people are like subliminally hearing now, like systems and process. So obviously that's so important. And you too, as probably a coach, you see people come in all the time and are like, I just need some systems and processes. Like, it's so difficult for some people to really see that system, create the process and follow it. So obviously you had some kind of knack for it. And I'm getting the idea that it was from being in the Marine Corps. There was probably a lot of systemization in there that kind of molded you in that way.
Oh, totally. In fact, I think that lever you're talking about, or the magic wand or whatever, in order to implement your systems and processes, is a very high level of accountability. So we can have systems of processes, and we can lower the bar and do the minimum necessary, or we can look at those systems and processes and say, what's the maximum possible? And people don't join the Marines to just get by. They join the Marines because it's the hardest thing you can do in the military. It's the most difficult boot camp. And a lot of people are like, well, you got the lowest score on the entry exam, but the reality, I got a great score on the ASVAB, and I could have gone to any of the branches, but I'm like, I want to do the hardest thing I can do because it's what will shape me for the rest of my life. And when you raise that bar and continue to go after the higher bar, you're going to see greater results when you build those into your systems and processes.
Yeah. Accountability, that's huge right there. And it makes me think of all the people who go, I know what I need to do. I just need to do it, right? You get that. And I'm like, okay, well, there's a problem within that, right? So what is that? Do you believe for yourself, or even when you work with leaders, if they have the system and process, but they're just not following it, that accountability piece, is there something kind of underlying that's preventing them from doing that? Or is it usually a problem in the system and process?
I think, accountability, when you look at it, it's something we all need, but something we don't want.
Right.
Because it creates pain. And what was it? I don't know if Zig Ziglar or Jim Rohn or one of those said it's the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Yes. You just get to pick your pain. Yep. So I looked at it and I thought, okay, it's like eating. You can be disciplined and eat well and exercise and focus on your health, or you can regret that when you're sitting there in the emergency room after your heart attack. So which one do you want? I'll take the pain of discipline all day long. And that's really what accountability boils down to is, are you willing to seek the pain up front and build that pain tolerance into your daily activities versus just being a victim of, okay, I did it because I had to, when I had to, last minute, minimum necessary, things of that nature. So I don't know, accountability, that's key. And accountability, everybody's like, accountability's hard. No, it's not hard. What's hard is judgment. Okay. So
tell me more about
accountability is witnessing what you've done. Judgment is somebody casting some sort of an opinion about how you did it. So I'd rather be accountable than judged. And frankly, I don't care if somebody judges me, because I'm accountable and I've got the accounting for it, which is just witnessing the numbers of the outcome, because everything can be put into numbers. Yes or no, right. 1 or 2, 1 or 100 or whatever it might be. But ultimately it comes down to, were you accountable for what you put into your systems and processes?
Yeah. And I like the way you said, are you willing to kind of do that, have that pain up front, that's going to shape you into the person you want to be. Now, a question for you. I'm a big mindset person. So when you say, like, you kind of face it like it's pain, my mind goes to, let's just reframe that. Why do we even have to consider it pain? And I'm overly optimistic, some people say, but thoughts on that?
So I think you're right. It doesn't necessarily have to be pain. I guess the regret is always painful. Nobody says, I have this opportunity to be regretful about this. I mean,
right.
That doesn't work. But ultimately, I think you're right, Angie. When you look at, by doing this, I get the satisfaction of accomplishing it versus the pain of not accomplishing it later on.
For
because
sure.
everything takes effort. There's no coasting in life. There's no, all right, I'm just going to have mailbox money my whole life and not have to work for it. It doesn't exist unless you're a trust fund child or something like that. And I surely haven't met a whole lot of those. I'm definitely not one. Everything I've got, I've worked for, and I'm sure it's the same for you.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, you're right. It's not necessarily pain, it's opportunity, and you have to work for that opportunity.
Yeah. And it's still, I mean, I've been coaching for, over 20 years. And I think sometimes we're very much in this mindset where you just do what you got to do, and I think that's kind of what you're referring to there, right? It's accountability. You don't want to have the regret later, but oftentimes that's really hard for people to understand. So, but let's talk a little bit about your leadership. Obviously, that got you into this place of working at RE/MAX. It sounds like, just the way you even spoke, that you had a great mentor in that space. Probably, showed you how leadership really was. Can you tell me about that?
I remember back when I first met Dave Liniger, I was running the SWAT team, and he would come out and ride with me, actually. And he would ask me questions about why I'm leading my people a certain way. So we'd be driving around in a police car. He'd be sitting there in the passenger seat, and I had my computer and my cell phone and a pager when we had pagers. And the radio, of course. And he would watch how I played the chess game on the street with calls that were coming in, tactical operations that were happening, and then the people involved with it. Because in law enforcement, you go from call to call to call. Salespeople, think about that. You go from call to call to call.
Right.
Same thing. You can't take the difficult remnants of the last call, the frustration or the failure or the rejection, to the next call, because then all you're going to do is continue that flow of downward spiral, and then you're going to have nothing but losses all day. Sure, you're going to have rejection, you're going to have failure, you're going to have difficult situations, but if you learn from those and you deliver quality leadership, emotional intelligence, emotional maturity in those different aspects of deploying your actions and your accountabilities, what you say, how you say it, how you deal with people, you're going to find results. So Dave ultimately started asking me questions about those things because he noticed those things. And you have to hold up the mirror and go, what am I doing right? What am I not doing right? I can do better. And he was my mirror for a long time. As you know, Angie, as a coach can be, they don't tell you what to do. They help you discover what you're doing. So the reality was I got to start early with that. I was very, very blessed to find and cultivate the right relationship. And I don't say lucky because it was intentional on my part that I asked him to mentor me. And I say but because there's always something. Here's what I had to do in order to accomplish that. I had to ask him very good questions, and then I had to do what he told me to do. So you don't pay a mentor like you pay a coach. A coach, you pay money. A mastermind, you pay money to go to these things. A mentor, you pay with action by taking the advice that they give you and testing that advice in your space. Now, it might not be right for you, but if you just ignore what they say to you, they're going to look at you and go, why am I even telling you these things? You're not doing anything with it.
Yeah. Mentor's gone.
Totally. So that was like my beginning to the whole mentor process with Dave, and really truly discovering that I can learn from other people. And he said one thing to me that I found to be profound, and that was be a sponge. If you want to be a great leader, be a sponge. And we all know leaders learn and learners lead. Ultimately, what is a sponge? A sponge is not somebody who just soaks things up, because that's half of what a sponge does. You have to go find things to soak up, but then you wring yourself out and give them back. And that's the value you deliver in your leadership to the people that you're leading, is finding the right things to give back to them to help them get better. And thus you're leading them by influencing them with your actions and your education.
I love that analogy, soak it up, but then wring yourself out. It reminds me of, kind of what I talk to people about. And I'm sure you get this too, in a sense of you can't just learn things and take it in and not do anything with it. Because really, maybe you have the knowledge and you can, spit that out, but you have to actually use it and embrace it in order to embody it and show other people what it looks like.
Totally. And you said something very interesting there. And the thought when I listened to how you speak it, a lot of people are concerned that they're giving away their value by giving away the value, which is not true, folks. I think a lot of people realize that the more great stuff I give away, my knowledge and my help and my assistance and my guidance and things like that, the more the world pays me back.
Yes.
And you're paid back with opportunity. Nobody walks up and writes you a check for delivering value. What they do is they allow you to see opportunity, and it uncovers that because it presents itself to you. Like when Dave came to me and said, why don't you shut your stuff down and come work for Remax? That was my opportunity that he was paying me back with for seeing what I was given to the people that I led.
Right. Yeah, it all goes around. Comes around, goes
Totally.
around in a good way. Absolutely. So then how did you get to be known as the CEO of the people? Where'd that come from?
Gosh, somebody started calling me that. And it was interesting because I've always been very, very dedicated to helping the growth of the people that I lead. I love it. I have a YouTube channel. I have a podcast, Start With a Win. I have a book that I donate all the proceeds to children's hospitals when I sell that. It's called Start With a Win also. But ultimately, I wanted to help people become more and become better. In fact, I even changed the values of our company to more, MORE. And I would talk about the values to our 900 employees every month when we would have an all hands meeting. Every single month I communicated with my entire company. And basically we were 7 companies. Remax Holdings is more than just Remax. It's it's a portfolio of companies that I had the honor of leading all of those. And when you look at more the values, people would understand that we're all on the same track in life and in this business when they heard the values repeatedly from me. More stood for deliver to the max, be customer obsessed, do the right thing, and together everybody wins. So when you look at those values, those are all external facing values instead of we're the best in the real estate space and nobody sells more real estate than us. Those are all sales pitches.
Right.
Those are, those are not values. But when you deliver your values and you're helping people live those values, it helps them become more fulfilled with themselves. And we connected. And I was always, you're always available to people. Sometimes you're not as accessible, but you're always available and they hear and see you constantly. So my delivery constantly to these people, I think made me labeled as CEO of the people, one of the most admired CEOs in Colorado, Maverick CEO. I mean, you got all these titles and these awards and little certificates and things like that. But ultimately it boils down to, are you there to be a good leader is the way I look at it.
And I can hear, even back from your early years, that was probably always a focal point for you, like helping and being a person for the people. So, I feel like that's probably an innate ability that was within you. But I have a question for you. Do you believe that as a great leader, you always have to be liked?
No.
Okay. It's one of the conversations I have with leaders all the time, because most leaders want everyone to like them, right? They don't want anyone to be mad at them. And they feel like they define this leadership by, well, if maybe I'm the CEO of the people, like everybody likes me and I'm making everybody happy.
No, there's a lot of people I didn't make happy, but ultimately they understood that I was working for the welfare of the whole. And that's ultimately what a leader has to do, is understand that your job is not to be liked. Your job isn't even necessarily, everybody's like, well, I'd rather be respected than liked. Great. If they respect you, they will appreciate that you have to make hard decisions for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately, I think, what it came down to is if you're consistent and you're transparent and you build that trust and confidence with the people that follow you, that you're going to execute for them and you're accountable for that execution, then they will learn to like you, even if they don't like what you're doing. And they understand, I don't like that decision. But that doesn't mean it takes away from my feelings towards you as the leader, as being, okay, you're probably the best one in that situation, because I know you have to make hard decisions.
Right.
If all you're doing is seeking friends, go be the mayor of the company or something like that and shake hands and kiss babies.
Yeah.
But, the ambassador or something like that. And this is why a lot of people don't want to be the CEO, because your neck is hanging out for every decision you make. And I made some bad ones. I've made some good ones. The bad ones, I've said, yeah, that was a bad decision. Okay, we're going to unwind that. Some bad decisions are labeled as bad decisions, and there might be a good reason behind that bad decision behind the scenes that people don't see, which I've made those as well. And you're going to take some heat for that. And that heat's never going to go away. And they're always going to, you did this. Well, there's some other reasons for that you just don't understand, that were for the betterment overall. So we have to balance all these things. But no, if all you're trying to do is be liked, go be a clown. I don't know. Go do something where people are like, yay, they're here. Be a mascot. But don't be one to make decisions.
I feel like we need to say that 100 times for leaders. And I think it's mostly in these leaders that are starting companies and that are growing, their companies past that minimum size that they initially were. And it's that, you're not in the business, you're not in that role to be liked. And you're going to have to make hard decisions time and time again. And with that being said, what do you think is the hardest thing that a leader has to do, but is the most important in all your leadership roles?
The hardest thing is cultivating and developing the right people.
Tell me more.
And that includes getting rid of the wrong people.
There we go. That's hard.
That is hard. And we all have a heart. You are not the leader of a company if you're cold-blooded and you don't care about the people and you just step on lives. That's a difficult situation. And, to go back to your liked comment question, the people that you build and develop as a leader, they will love you. Not in a lustful way, but they will love you and care about your heart with their heart if you care about their heart with your heart. And you can tell those that don't care about the company, they're there for a paycheck. I get it. They're worker bees in life, but I want the most passionate worker bees I can get in my business. And it was fascinating. I heard it today. A friend of mine puts out videos all the time about leadership and things like that. And he said, be small and mighty. I had 900 employees. That's definitely not small.
No,
but we were mighty. No, we're in 110 countries, 150,000 customers in 110 countries. We did over 2 million real estate transactions a year. So we were small. Franchising, the idea behind it is, a small infrastructure, a huge output, which we accomplished that for sure. Ultimately, what it boils down to is have the right people in it and understand there are going to be some of the wrong people, and don't keep the wrong people because you're doing a disservice to the right people. And that's the hardest part. Ultimately, that's the hardest part, is getting rid of those people, because you're affecting lives. They have families, they have friends, they have bills to pay, but you're also freeing them to go someplace where they can be happy.
Yeah, that perspective shift, right? That I always love to put in there. So that brings up kind of a conversation then around taking things personally. As a CEO of the people, as being connected, caring about their heart, them caring about yours, there's obviously a personal side in that as well, but I'm assuming there's a really fine line so that you can make those hard decisions so that, yes, even though you're affecting someone's life, it's something that you have to do, and you've got to kind of take that personal side out of it, but still have personal in it, right?
Every business decision is personal. And it's fascinating because I've heard so many people say it's not personal, it's business, which is a bunch of garbage. I mean, that is not true in my opinion. It is personal. If you do it with dignity and kindness, it's okay, even if it's a hard decision. And I think sometimes you have to remind people that the decision was made with kindness and dignity in the best interest of the whole. And that's an ethical dilemma that we all face as business leaders is, am I making this as a mechanical decision or as a, and I don't want to say emotional decision, but you're making it with the thought of the people in mind. Who's it going to impact? How's it going to impact that? But you also have to balance that with the shareholder value of the business. And everybody's like, well, then it's not personal. No, it is personal because the shareholders are people too, and they take it personally what you're doing with their money. So yes, every decision you make is personal. And if you reflect on it that way, then it's okay. As a leader, you should not shut that out because then you start making decisions for the wrong reason. And I've had to make a lot of hard decisions. We've been through several different massive downturns. Sometimes you have to lay people off. Sometimes you get to go hire a whole bunch of people. It's cycles in business. We're seeing it right now. We saw it during the pandemic. You have to make tough decisions. I had to balance tough decisions. I gave up like $14 million in profitability during the pandemic to my shareholders in order to keep my customers. But I kept my customers to later help my shareholders also. Right. So you have to explain this across the board and balance these needs of people, business, but it's always personal. And if you look at it that way and go, what's the personal side of this? What's the business side of this? How do we have a good crossover? It's like a Venn diagram where the result's in the middle.
But I think you said something really important in there. You used the word emotion. And sometimes I think people kind of combine that, personal and emotional, and they're two separate things. Just because you make a decision that is personal doesn't mean that you have to have emotion in it and, come from this highly emotional place when making that decision.
100%. Angie, that's a great point because we hear a lot of emotional based words from leaders. And that's a cue to me that this leader is not making the decision based on the big picture. They're making a decision based on some reactionary feelings.
Oh, interesting.
And an example of those words might be concern. If you see a leader use the word concern, you have to think to yourself, why are you concerned about this? Because concern is a fear-based word.
Absolutely.
Are we in a giving mode or a taking mode? Fear creates a taking mode. Love creates a giving mode. We have to be operating from the emotion of love, not the emotion of fear, because in fear, we fight, flight, or freeze. In love, we give unconditionally and we find opportunities and we overcome the challenges with those opportunities, the concern, in order to find success or in order to shut down that fear and move on to something else, because that fear could be nothing more than a distraction. And if it's nothing more than a distraction, why are you spending your time on it? Go do the things that build your business and help your people.
I think that's why we say, good leaders do not make fear-based decisions.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've given us so many great pieces. I hear you talk about the values of your company, and I love that because values to me, I think knowing your personal values is the number one thing you have to do in life. And then when you have a company, have people that embody those values and align with them so that it's an extension of your company. So the values, having good people, cultivating great people, and getting rid of the ones that aren't. What else goes into, this high level, what you really call, and tell us your definition of this, model leadership?
I use the phrase, how you do one thing is how you do all things.
Mm-hmm.
I want everybody to think about that phrase, because your decisions create your actions, and your actions are what everybody sees.
Mm-hmm.
And what they see, they will model. So whether or not, here's a good example. You've got a leader who says, okay, we have to work on the health of our company, yet this leader is 100 pounds overweight and can barely make it up the steps onto the podium to tell you the story.
Mm-hmm.
How you do one thing is how you do all things. Another example, you might have we actually talked about this, a study around this in my MBA class when I did an executive MBA program. And that being, let's say you have a CFO, and that CFO is cheating on their spouse.
Mm-hmm.
That CFO is likely to cheat on the books also.
Sure.
Okay. Because when we give away our integrity, or we give away our focus and our intensity in one part of our life, it's going to bleed into other parts of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So when your employees, or potential employees for that matter, and I've actually had people join my company or do business with my company based upon my videos of how I operate and how I deliver my messaging as a leader, and the things that they've seen me do via video. I've literally done millions of dollars worth of business. People call me up going, I saw your videos and I really think we should do business together. Like, oh, okay. How they see you do things is how they build their trust around how you will do things. And those in your business will model that behavior through our mirror neurons in our brain. You're a coach, and performance is based upon understanding, seeing, and executing something. And when we see our leader understand, see, and execute something a particular way, we model that in order to accomplish things. If you don't, it doesn't mean you need to know how to do everything, leaders. You just have to be directionally correct and have the right people in place, but you have to be operating the rest of your life appropriately so that they will want to perform at that type of level. So, you see a leader that dresses like, terribly or something like that. They're all wrinkled and their clothes don't fit, and they look like they're sweating through their clothes. Who knows what it is, or they don't take care of themselves physically, emotionally. Their life is in shambles, whatever it might be. Guess what? They're saying it's okay for the people that follow them to act that way.
So powerful.
So I'm a firm believer that people want to work for people that they see operating at a level that they want to operate at. Totally. That's how we choose our leaders. People join companies and they leave leaders, or managers for that matter, because those people are not living to the standards that those employees want to live to themselves.
So true. And I think that you're spot on with that, but how do people, and it's almost like a shift to the other side here, because we're talking all about these leaders, but speaking of that, when people want to work for great leaders, but you don't sometimes even know, you can't see enough of that leader before you kind of join in. Like, you were able to see that, through your experience, but not everybody can. So what do you do in that instance when you don't really know whether or not, when you're taking a job, whether or not that leadership that is being modeled is really what you want to follow?
I think you do some leadership investigation there. You got to do your homework.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a paycheck, okay, you go find the paycheck you want. But if you're looking for a career opportunity, you need to, kind of buckle down a little bit and go do as much research as you can. I believe that, and I actually teach this course to MBA students called Executive Leadership. I talk about the voice of the leader and your executive presence. And executive presence really boils down to a few simple aspects. It's a lot of it is your gravitas, which is how you deliver your charisma in public. Also, a fair amount of this is your appearance. So you need to be able to appear like a leader. You want people to look at you and go, that person's in charge of something. I can tell, because it's their personal presence in collaboration with their grooming and their polish and things of that nature. And, unless you're like running a skateboard company where you're wearing a hoodie and, skateboarding down the hallway all day long or something like that, which that's what your customers want to be and do and see and become. Ultimately, it comes down to how do you act and also your communication capability. So as a leader, are you even communicating so that people who want to join your company can see what your company's about because of you? Or are you just hiding in the corner office? Because you're not a leader then, you're a hider. And that really came out during the pandemic, where you had companies where the CEO said, we're not going to say anything. It's safer to say nothing. And a lot of attorneys and general counsel within organizations said, don't say anything because we don't want to be labeled as something. But the reality, and I'm not saying go out and make political statements, by no means. And I'm not saying take a polarized position on anything. I think that's ridiculous for you to take polarized positions on things in society. I think you need to do good for your customers in society, do good for your shareholders, and do good for your employees. Period. I don't want to see a polarizing statement out of a CEO. Ultimately, what I do want to see is a CEO who cares about people from those three classifications and act that way and be out there so people can go, I like that CEO. I want to work there. I want to follow what they're doing. And I've had that happen. This is speaking from experience. This is not some Pollyanna thought by a guy who talks about business. I've done it and it works.
I love that. You said earlier, you have YouTube videos out there and people have seen those and wanted to come work for you. And that's important. So I know we kind of took a turn with this, but I know that we have a lot of listeners who are not maybe in that leadership role. And if you want to work with a powerful leader, an inspiring leader, you have to do your homework. And it goes back to those values of not just getting the paycheck. Don't just look for the highest paying job. Look at your values and what's important to you, and then do your homework to make sure that leader is in alignment with those values. I think that's ultimately how you really get what you want, and you're in a place where you have all that opportunity.
Totally. And here's another idea, folks. If you're looking for a great place to work, send them a video and talk about these things yourself. You want to go to the top of that resume stack, put yourself together that way and send it off and see what kind of response you get, because that's what I look for in current and future leaders in my businesses, is somebody who's willing to stand up in front of the organization and have that charisma. And a lot of people are like, I can't get on camera.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, go to TikTok or go to Instagram or YouTube or whatever. I got news for you. Hundreds of millions of people a day are doing it. So if you're not willing to do it, it might be time to start breaking the ice and getting out there and showing the world what you're made of as a leader, if you want to be doing that.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I think there's a problem of, so much judgment with everyone being out there doing it, though. Like you said earlier, it's hard. It's hard. People fear that judgment. And I know that's a piece that I work on with my clients a lot, is coming from a place of authenticity. Like you said, having your, whether it's opinion, you're not trying to polarize people per se, but you have to be who you are and show up. I love what you said about, if you're not a leader, you're a hider. If you're a hider, you're not a leader. And it's really true. You've got to have a presence. And I secretly wish we could have a whole conversation on CEOs making polarizing statements, because there's a lot of that right now. So someday for another topic, another conversation.
Totally. Here's Angie. Here's a statement to kind of put a bow on that thought for you.
Please.
A friend of mine, Mark Sparks, wrote a book, and I love the title of this book. It was all about his challenges as a business leader. And this guy has built, sold, developed hundreds of businesses. He is he's one of my mentors, and he's part of a mastermind that I'm in. His book is called They Can't Eat You. And
haven't heard of it.
Think about that, folks. If you're afraid of putting yourself out there, what are you afraid of? Judgment?
Yes.
They're not going to eat you. So do it.
I think I'm going to have to start stealing that. And that's what I'm going to have to bring to people. They can't eat you. Because it really is. I ask all the time, I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? What are you ultimately afraid of? Our mind makes these gross, stories up about what could happen. And until we really tap in and go, oh, really nothing, we leave these big stories that cause so much fear. But I love that. And now I have to write that down and get that book too. They Can't Eat You, for anyone who's listening. So I wanted to kind of wrap up here with performance. I know that you, had great earnings, hit records, you fulfilled your role as a leader of the people. But not only that, from a financial and a revenue perspective, you really did what you needed to do in your previous role as CEO of RE/MAX. So people are going to be wondering, what does that take? Outside of leadership, is there something else that they should be zoning in on to accomplish such feats?
That's a great question, Angie. Ultimately, you got to mind your numbers. You have to understand the revenue and the expenses within your business. Mm-hmm. We always have this tendency to go out and, hey, we have to hire more people. That's always the biggest expense of any business is, oh my gosh, it's, here's the new budget for the new year and we need to hire all these people. And instead of saying, okay, how can we be better with what we have? Or frankly, we might be better with fewer people, for crying out loud. Because the reality is we do get in each other's way a lot. And if we stop doing stupid stuff, we can focus on the important stuff. And, not to get technical with the stupid versus the important, but the reality is you have to be aware of your business. I talk about, you and I talked earlier about, I have a leadership course coming out called Leadership Factory. It's the Leadership Transformation Blueprint. And I talk a lot about emotional intelligence and emotional maturity in that. And if you understand those two concepts as a leader, emotional intelligence is, I call it the 3 A's. It's awareness of self, awareness of others, and awareness of business. So when you take and you combine those 3 things, you notice how they play together. And does increasing the bottom line matter? Yes. Does increasing the top line revenue matter? Yes. Those things do matter in a business. Let's not forsake, it's called a business, not a charity, for a reason. Right. In fact, top line and bottom line do matter in a charity too, folks. So, you got to pay your bills and you got to be able to give into your cause. But the emotional maturity aspect also is about making decisions. It's choice management is what emotional maturity is. We see a lot of leaders without emotional maturity. They just don't know they don't have it because we don't talk about emotional maturity very much. Right. Choice management means you're saying yes to the right things and no to the wrong things. And you're only entertaining the right things. So for instance, how many calls a day do you get where people are like, hey, I just want to set up a call with you? You're like, no. But I know people who will say yes to every person who reaches out to them and says, let's set up a 30-minute call. I'm here to help you. And you're like, okay, guess what you're doing? You're letting everybody capture your calendar and take it over and run your business the way that they want to run it instead of the way that you can run it. So It takes minding your emotional intelligence and minding your emotional maturity to build that collaboration with your people in your business, but also with yourself and how you make those decisions. That's how you achieve your numbers, is making decisions and owning those decisions the right way.
I love it. You're speaking my language and talking about kind of going through the people, and then you end up getting that desired result that you want on the numbers. And instead of that being your focal point and letting everything else get skipped there, I say it time and time again. And also for people, like, ignorance is not bliss. With the financials, not everybody has that numbers background, and it's just, you can't look away from it. You have to tune into it. Like you said, it's not the answer of just hiring more people or doing something different isn't always the answer. So knowing those numbers, and I come from the financial industry, so easier said than done, for me, but other people, you have to know the numbers. You have to know what you're looking at there, but focusing on the people, going through the people to get where you want to go. Love it.
Totally.
I always ask Adam, everyone who joins, and you've already shared so much wisdom with us, but I always like to ask my guests, what is the most important or inspiring piece of wisdom that you've ever received from another person?
I would say never settle.
Mm.
And when I look at something in life, when I look at a business opportunity, when I look at what I'm doing, and I choose to do something with it. So, it has to go through my different stage gates in order to get to the point where I decide to pursue it. It's never settle. How can I maximize this situation and maximize my growth as a leader in the process? The results will come at that point. So I like that term, never settle. But I will say this also, and Bill McDermott told me this. I was in a small group, and I asked him this piece of advice when I was a brand new CEO. He was the CEO of SAP. Great man, incredible person. I said, what piece of advice do you have for me as a CEO? And he paused. It was like this really, really powerful pause. And he said, stay hungry and stay humble. And I always remember that. In fact, I have it on my wall at home.
Love it.
And it's great advice, which, you take those things, and really what I do is you don't tolerate mediocrity in your life. Life is hard. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I struggle with it just like everybody else does. But I look at it and I go, I've accomplished things. I know I can accomplish things. So push through the difficulties and the struggles in order to find successes. So stay hungry and stay humble and never settle.
Both. So good. And what you just said at the end there makes me want to open up a whole nother conversation about, you've accomplished things in the past, which is why I believe you have your whole formula around Start with a Win and your book there, because we've got to give ourselves those wins. We've got to recognize those. There it is right there. That book, Start with a Win. Everybody needs to have a win every single day. And in my morning mindset journal, I even ask them, what was your win for the day? Because we've got to recognize those in order to bring them into our confidence and keep that belief that we are capable and fight on to that higher level. So many great tidbits of information here and wisdom. I appreciate you coming on. And for those of you who want to be a better leader, you want to be that CEO of the people, reach out to Adam Contos as his website, adamcontos.com. He's got the Leadership Factory course coming up to be a better leader, that emotional intelligence and maturity, all good pieces. So thanks again, Adam, for joining us.
Thanks, Angie. It's a pleasure being on your show.
Thank you.